the drifting tomb. The silence was the worst part. Dr. Marcus Chen had grown accustomed to the constant hum of the stellar Horizon's engines during their 3-month journey to the Kepler Nebula. Now, floating in the emergency lighting of Deck 7, that familiar sound was gone, replaced by the occasional groan of stressed metal and the distant hiss of atmosphere recyclers working overtime. Marcus pulled himself along the corridor handholds, his magnetic boots clicking against the deck plating with each careful step. The artificial gravity was failing in sections, creating pockets of zero-G that made navigation treacherous. His environmental suit's heads-up display showed oxygen levels dropping steadily. At current consumption rates, he had maybe 18 hours before the recyclers gave out completely. 18 hours to figure out what had gone so catastrophically wrong. The explosion had come without warning. Marcus had been in his lab, cataloging mineral samples from the recent asteroid survey, when the ship's entire superstructure had shuddered like a living thing in pain. Emergency klaxons had wailed for exactly 47 seconds before cutting to an ominous quiet. The ship's AI, Aria, had managed one garbled transmission about a critical containment breach in Cargo Bay 12 before going completely silent. That had been 6 hours ago. In that time, Marcus had discovered that he was apparently the only survivor among the Stellar Horizon's crew of the bridge was sealed behind emergency bulkheads that wouldn't respond to his security codes. The escape pods were either launched or destroyed. Life support was running on emergency power. And worst of all, the ship was drifting its navigation. Systems dark and unresponsive. Marcus reached the intersection leading to Cargo Bay 12 and paused. According to the ship's manifest, their bay should have contained nothing more dangerous than archaeological equipment and mineral samples. But the blast patterns he'd observed suggested something far more volatile had been stored there. The walls around the bay showed signs of intense heat and electromagnetic discharge, patterns that reminded him uncomfortably of the weapon signatures he'd studied from the ancient ruins on Proxima 7. The memory made him shiver. Those ruins had been all that remained of a civilization that had vanished overnight, leaving behind only melted stone and quantum-scorched metal. The scientific consensus was that they had been victims of their own technology. Some experiment gone wrong that had consumed their entire world. Marcus had spent 2 years studying those remains, and the theoretical weapon signatures had haunted his dreams ever since. Now, floating in the wreckage of his own ship, those same signatures were all around him. Marcus activated his suit's recording function and began speaking into his helmet. Personal log, Dr. Marcus Chen, Synorchaeology Division, Stellar Horizon Expedition. Ship time shows 2,347 hours, 6th day of the month. The ship has suffered catastrophic damage from an unknown source. I'm currently investigating Cargo Bay 12, which appears to be the epicenter of whatever destroyed us. He pushed off from the wall and glided toward the bay's main entrance. The massive door had been blown outward, its 2-foot-thick titanium steel composite twisted like paper. Beyond lay a chamber that should have been familiar, but now looked like the inside of a star's core. Everything was wrong. The walls weren't just damaged. They had been transformed, their molecular structure altered into something that looked almost organic. Ribbed surfaces pulsed with a faint bioluminescent glow, and the air itself seemed to shimmer with residual energy. At the center of what had once been a cargo bay sat something that definitely hadn't been on any manifest Marcus had seen. It was roughly cylindrical, about 12 feet long and 6 feet in diameter, made from a black material that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The surface was covered in intricate patterns that hurt to look at directly, as if they existed in more dimensions than human eyes were designed to perceive. "Arya," Marcus called out, though he knew the AI wasn't responding. "If you can hear this, I need information about the object in Cargo Bay 12. This wasn't part of our mission. Parameters?" Silence answered him. Marcus approached the object carefully, his suit's sensors going wild with readings he didn't understand. Radiation levels were elevated, but not immediately dangerous. The electromagnetic field around the object was unlike anything in the scientific literature. Most disturbing of all, his suit kept detecting what it classified as biological activity, from something that was clearly artificial. Marcus circled the object, recording everything. Up close, he could see that the patterns on its surface weren't just decorative. They were moving, flowing like liquid mercury, occasionally forming symbols that seemed almost familiar before dissolving back into chaos. The object was approximately cylindrical, but with geometric impossibilities that made his eyes water. Corners that led nowhere, surfaces that curved back on themselves, edges that existed in spaces his mind couldn't properly process. As he completed his second circuit, Marcus noticed something that made his blood freeze. There was a viewing port in the object's side, barely visible unless you were at exactly the right angle. Through the transparent material, he could see the suggestion of a form suspended in some kind of fluid. It was vaguely humanoid, but wrong in every proportion. Too tall, too thin, with limbs that bent in directions that should have been impossible. And despite being apparently unconscious or dead, Marcus had the unshakable feeling that it was somehow aware of his presence. A soft chime from his helmet's consistent nearly made him jump out of his skin. For a moment, he thought Arya had come back online, but the voice that emerged from his speakers was different. Older, sadder, and definitely human. "Is someone there? Please, I've been trying to reach anyone for hours." Marcus spun around, searching for the source of the transmission. "This is Dr. Marcus Chen. Who is this? Where are you?" "Commander Elena Vasquez, Senior Research Officer. I'm in Laboratory Complex C, Level 9. The blast doors sealed automatically. After the incident, I've been trapped here since it happened." Relief flooded through Marcus. He wasn't alone. "Commander, this is incredible. I thought I was the only survivor. What's your status?" "Alive, but not great. The lab took damage, and I'm showing signs of radiation exposure. My suit's medical systems are keeping me stable, but I need to get to the medical bay soon. More importantly, I need to talk to you about what's in that cargo bay." Marcus looked back at the impossible object and its sleeping occupant. "You know what this is." "I know what it was supposed to be." Elena's voice carried a weight of regret that made Marcus uneasy. "The object you're looking at is designated XA471. We recovered it from the ruins on Kepler 4 for 2B3 months ago. It was supposed to be inert, just another archaeological curiosity, but our scans were wrong, dead wrong." "What do you mean?" "It's not an artifact, Marcus. It's a prison, and the radiation signature suggests that the containment field is failing." Marcus stared at the viewing port and the impossible form suspended within. "What's inside it?" "According to the fragmentary records we found at the dig site, it's something the ancient civilization called a void walker, near as we can translate. It was some kind of entity that could manipulate space-time directly. The records suggest it consumed entire star systems before they managed to trap it." The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow, And you brought it aboard a research vessel. We didn't know. Elena's voice cracked with emotion. The containment field looked stable. All our tests suggested it was just an empty shell, maybe a ceremonial sarcophagus. We had no idea there was still something alive inside. Marcus backed away from the object, his suit's radiation detectors beginning to chirp more urgently. I'm reading increasing energy emissions from the artifact. What happens if the containment fails completely? Based on the records we translated, the Voidwalker doesn't just destroy things. It unmakes them, breaks down the quantum structure of matter itself. If it gets free, Elena's transmission dissolved into static for a moment before returning. Marcus, you need to get to Laboratory Complex C. I've been working on a way to stabilize the containment field, but I need someone who understands Xenotech to help implement it. Marcus was already moving, pushing off from the cargo bay walls and heading for the nearest transit shaft. On my way, what's the current status of the containment field? Failing faster than I hoped. My instruments show maybe 6 hours before. Complete collapse. After that, the entity inside will be free to do whatever it wants. As Marcus navigated through the damaged corridors toward Laboratory Complex C, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Every shadow seemed to hide something. Every reflection in the damaged wall panels showed movement where there should be none. The ship itself felt different, as if its very structure was becoming something alien and hostile. The transit shaft to level 9 was damaged, forcing Marcus to take a circuitous route through the ship's maintenance corridors. As he climbed through the narrow spaces, his helmet lights revealing twisted metal and sparking electronics, he began to understand the true scope of the disaster that had befallen the stellar horizon. This wasn't just an accident. The damage patterns were too precise, too purposeful. Something had systematically compromised the ship's most critical systems, as if it had intimate knowledge of human technology and exactly how to cripple it. The radiation that had killed the crew hadn't been randomly distributed. It had been focused on areas where people would naturally take shelter during an emergency. Whatever was in that container, it had been planning this escape for a very long time. Marcus finally reached Laboratory Complex C after nearly an hour of crawling through damaged corridors. The massive blast doors were indeed sealed, but Alina had jury-rigged a communication system through the ventilation shafts. As Marcus approached, he could hear her working frantically on the other side. "Alina, I'm here. How do I get through these doors?" "There's an emergency override panel about 20 feet to your left. The code is 7741 Alpha Beta. But Marcus, before you come in, there's something else you need to know." Marcus located the panel and began entering the code. "What is it?" "The entity in the container, ... T. It's not completely unconscious. It's been influencing the ship's systems, learning about us, preparing. The explosion wasn't an accident. It was the first phase of an escape plan that's been centuries in the making." The blast doors began to cycle open with a pneumatic hiss. As they parted, Marcus saw Alina Vasquez for the first time. She was younger than he'd expected, maybe 30, with a kind of intense focus that came from years of working with dangerous technologies. Her research lab was a chaos of jury-rigged equipment and holographic displays showing incomprehensible data streams. "Welcome to the command center of humanity's last stand," Alina said grimly. "Because if we can't find a way to stop what's happening on this ship, it won't just be us who die. That thing will be free to do to Earth what it did to Kepler-4 for to be." Marcus looked at the data streaming across Elena's displays and felt his heart sink. The energy readings from Cargo Bay 12 were climbing exponentially. Whatever was in that container was waking up, and they were running out of time to stop it. "So what's the plan?" Marcus asked, though he was afraid he already knew the answer. Alina met his eyes with a look of grim determination. "We're going to have to go back down there and face it directly. It's the only way." The price of survival. Elena's plan was as desperate as it was dangerous. She had spent the hours since the explosion analyzing every fragment of data about the Voidwalker that the archaeological team had managed to translate. The ancient civilization that had imprisoned the entity had left behind a kind of instruction manual, though manual was perhaps too generous a term for the cryptic warnings and half-understood technical specifications they had recovered. The key, Alina explained as she gathered her equipment, is that the Voidwalker isn't just a creature. It's more like a living idea, a concept that exists partially outside normal space-time. The prison doesn't contain its body so much as it contains its ability to manifest in our reality. Marcus helped her load specialized scanning equipment into a transport case, his hands shaking slightly from exhaustion and fear. And if the containment fails, then it becomes real again, fully real. And according to these records, when that happens, it doesn't just consume matter and energy. It consumes the quantum foundations that hold reality together. Alina sealed the case and looked at Marcus with eyes that had seen too much in too little time. The civilization on Kepler 4 for 2b didn't just die, Marcus. They were erased. Every trace of their existence across multiple dimensions, wiped clean as if they had never been. The journey back to Cargo Bay 12 felt like a descent into hell. The ship's corridors had continued to change, the metal walls taking on that same organic, bioluminescent quality that surrounded the prison. The air itself seemed thick and oppressive, as if reality was becoming unstable just from the Voidwalker's proximity. When they reached the cargo bay, Marcus immediately saw that the situation had deteriorated dramatically. The impossible geometric patterns on the prison's surface were moving faster now, forming and dissolving symbols at a rate that made his eyes water. The energy readings on Elena's scanners were off the charts, and the viewing port that had shown the entity suspended in fluid now revealed an empty chamber. "It's gone," Marcus whispered, staring at the vacant interior of the prison. "No," Alina said grimly, studying her instruments. "It's here, everywhere. It's just not fully manifested yet." As if summoned by her words, the very air in the cargo bay began to shimmer and distort. Reality twisted like heated glass, and something vast and terrible began to take shape in the space around them. The Voidwalker didn't appear so much as it imposed itself on existence. A presence so alien that Marcus's mind struggled to process what he was seeing. It was tall, impossibly tall, with a form that seemed to exist in too many dimensions at once. Its limbs bent through angles that led to nowhere. Its surface reflected lights that weren't there, and when it moved, space itself seemed to ripple and tear around it. But most terrifying of all were its eyes, if they could be called eyes. They were voids in reality itself, windows into the spaces between atoms where nothing should exist. When it spoke, its voice didn't come through the air, but seemed to resonate directly in Marcus's bones, in the quantum structures of his cells, in the electrical patterns of his brain. Finally, the Voidwalker said, and the word carried with it the weight of eons, "How long has it been since I felt the taste of structured reality?" Alina stepped forward, her scanner held like a weapon. 3,417 standard years, according to our dating of the Kepler ruins. The entity turned its attention to her, and Marcus saw Alina stagger under the force of its regard. "Ah, the tiny archaeologist. You have been studying my former captors, haven't you? Tell me, did you learn why they found it necessary to imprison me?" "Because you're a monster," Alina said through gritted teeth. "You destroyed entire civilizations." The Void Walker's form rippled with what might have been amusement. "Monster, such a limited concept. I am entropy given consciousness, the universe's own desire to return to a simpler state. I do not destroy, I perfect." Marcus found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "Perfect how? By killing everyone. By removing the unnecessary complexity of organized matter and energy. Stars are inefficient. Planets are chaotic. Life is a statistical anomaly that the universe would prefer to correct." The entity moved closer, and Marcus felt the temperature around them drop by several degrees. "I simply helped the universe achieve its natural state more quickly." Alina raised her scanner and activated something Marcus didn't recognize. A beam of coherent energy lanced out, striking the Void Walker directly in what might have been its center of mass. The entity didn't even seem to notice. "Quantum containment field," Alina explained quickly. "It worked on the prison, the Void." Walker examined the energy beam with what appeared to be mild curiosity. "Interesting. Your species has learnt to manipulate quantum structures. Crude, but not without merit." With a gesture that was more concept and movement, the entity dispersed Alina's beam like smoke. "However, I am not a quantum structure that can be contained. I am the spaces between quantum structures." Alina's scanner sparked and died. She looked at Marcus with desperate eyes. "The backup plan. We need to implement the backup plan." Marcus had no idea what she was talking about, but before he could ask, the Void Walker spoke again. "You interest me, small creatures. In my long imprisonment, I observed your kind as you built your civilization among the stars. You are remarkably persistent, even in the face of impossible odds. It would be ... wasteful to simply unmake you immediately." Alina grabbed Marcus's arm. "It's offering a deal. Don't listen to it, a deal." Marcus asked, though he already suspected. He didn't want to hear the answer. "Simple enough. I require a means of transportation to reach systems with more substantial matter concentrations. Your vessel is damaged but repairable. I will restore it to full functionality and deliver you safely to any destination you choose. In exchange, you will not attempt to interfere with my activities once we part ways." Marcus felt a cold knot form in his stomach, and those activities would be the perfection of approximately 47 star systems within a reasonable distance. Of this location, perhaps 50 billion of your people, but the universe will be more elegant without them. Alina was already shaking her head violently. "No, absolutely not. We won't be part of genocide on that scale." The Void Walker's attention shifted to her, and Alina gasped as if she had been struck. "Genocide implies the destruction of a species. I do not destroy. I simply return matter and energy to more fundamental states. It is, in fact, the most natural thing in the universe." Marcus stepped between Alina and the entity, though he knew it was a futile gesture. "There has to be another option." "Death," the Void Walker replied simply. "Your vessel will fail completely within the next few hours. Your life support will cease. Your bodies will decompose. Eventually, the atoms that once comprised your forms will drift apart and achieve the same fundamental state I would provide. But over the course of billions of years, rather than microseconds, I am merely more efficient." Marcus looked at Alina, who was working frantically with what remained of her equipment. He could see that she had some kind of desperate plan, but whatever it was, she needed more time. "What if we could find you a different kind of transportation?" Marcus asked, stalling. "Something that doesn't require us to be complicit in mass murder." The entity considered this with alien thoughtfulness. Intriguing. What did you have in mind? Marcus's mind raced. He needed to find something the Void Walker wanted more than easy transportation. Something that would distract it long enough for Alina to implement. Whatever backup plan she had developed, then inspiration struck. During his years studying ancient ruins, Marcus had learned that some civilizations had tried to preserve themselves not through technology but through information, encoding their entire cultural existence into quantum data structures that could survive even physical destruction. "Information," Marcus said suddenly. "You said you observed our civilization during your imprisonment. What if I could give you access to our entire cultural database? Every piece of art, literature, music, and knowledge that humanity has ever produced." The Void Walker's form shifted, betraying what might have been genuine interest. "Why would this matter to me?" "Because you're wrong about the universe wanting to return to a simpler state," Marcus said, the words tumbling out as his plan took shape. "If that were true, why would consciousness have evolved at all? Why would intelligence arise? The universe isn't trending toward simplicity. It's trending toward complexity, toward meaning, toward understanding itself through beings like us." Alina looked up from her equipment, understanding dawning in her eyes. She began typing furiously on her remaining functional console. "Preposterous," the Void Walker said, but there was uncertainty in its cosmic voice. "Consciousness is an accident. Intelligence is a brief aberration." "Then why do you have consciousness?" Marcus pressed. "If the universe truly wanted to return, two fundamental particles, why would it create something like you that can think and plan and desire? You're not entropy given form. You're the universe's own creativity, its drive to explore what's possible." The entity moved closer, and Marcus could feel reality bending around him. "You seek to confuse me with primitive philosophy. I'm offering you something genuinely unique," Marcus said. "Every piece of human creative expression, all our attempts to understand existence, all our questions about the nature of reality. Isn't that more interesting than just turning matter back into energy?" Behind him, Marcus heard Alina whisper, "Almost got it. Keep talking." The Void Walker was silent for a long moment, and Marcus realized that, in its alien way, it was genuinely considering his offer. For something that had spent millennia in isolation, the prospect of experiencing an entire civilization's intellectual and creative output might indeed be more appealing than simple destruction. "Very well," the entity said finally. "Show me." This information, Elena's console chimed, and she looked up with grim satisfaction. "Marcus, I need you to activate the ship's cultural database and route it through the main holographic projectors. All of it. Every song, every story, every piece of human expression we have on board." Marcus moved to the intact portion of the cargo bay's control systems and began the upload process. As terabytes of human culture began flowing through the ship's networks, something unexpected happened. The holographic projectors, damaged by the explosion but still partially functional, began displaying random fragments of humanity's creative output. Music filled the air, symphonies and folk songs, and electronic compositions blending together in chaotic harmony. Images flashed across every available surface: paintings, photographs, architectural marvels, abstract art. Text scrolled past in dozens of languages. Poetry and prose and scientific papers creating a tapestry of human thought. The Voidwalker stood transfixed, its impossible form rippling as it absorbed the flood of information. For the first time since its emergence, it seemed genuinely surprised. This is... It began, then stopped, as if struggling to find concepts adequate to what it was experiencing. This is what complexity creates, Marcus said softly. Beauty, meaning, questions that lead to more questions. You said your entropy given consciousness, but this is what consciousness does when it's given time. It builds, it creates, it reaches toward understanding. The entity was changing, Marcus realized. The constant flux of its form was slowing, becoming more stable, as if the influx of human creativity was providing it with some kind of structure it had previously lacked. Alina grabbed Marcus's arm. It's working. The cultural data is acting like a kind of cognitive anchor. It's stabilizing the entity's quantum state. But for how long? Marcus asked. Long enough, Alina said grimly. She activated one final system on her console. Marcus, I need you to know that what I'm about to do will save both our lives and condemn this entity to another imprisonment. But it's the only way. The Voidwalker suddenly looked up from its absorption in human culture, as if sensing danger. What are you doing? Alina met its gaze steadily. Teaching you something about human creativity you haven't learned yet. Sometimes we create prisons so beautiful that we forget they're prisons at all. She activated the final sequence, and the ship's holographic systems exploded into full operation. Instead of displaying random fragments of culture, they began weaving the data together into a single, immersive experience. The cargo bay disappeared, replaced by a virtual environment that contained elements from every human civilization, every artistic achievement, every intellectual breakthrough. The Voidwalker found itself standing in a space that was simultaneously a concert hall, a library, an art gallery, and a laboratory. Around it swirled the complete output of human creativity, not as random fragments, but as a coherent narrative about what it meant to be conscious in an uncertain universe. This is your prison, Alina said softly. Not bars or energy fields, but an endless exploration of what thinking beings can create when they're given time and freedom. You wanted to perfect the universe by removing complexity, but this is what complexity can become. The entity tried to move toward them, but found itself drawn back into the virtual environment. Every step it took led to new wonders, new questions, new possibilities for understanding. It was trapped, not by force, but by fascination. You cannot imprison me with mere information, the Voidwalker protested, but its voice lacked conviction. We're not imprisoning you, Marcus realized, understanding Elena's plan at last. We're giving you exactly what you claimed to want, a perfect universe, one where consciousness can explore itself indefinitely without ever running out of new things to discover. The virtual environment continued to expand, drawing on the ship's quantum computers to generate endless variations and combinations of human cultural expression. The Voidwalker found itself experiencing music that had never been composed, reading stories that had never been written, contemplating art that existed only in the intersection of possibility and creativity. Alina began powering down the systems. Around them, the beauty of it is that from its perspective, it has all the time in the universe. The virtual environment operates on quantum processing, so, subjectively, it can experience billions of years of exploration in the time it takes for our ship's power to fail. Marcus watched as the Voidwalker became increasingly absorbed in its virtual paradise. And objectively, it's trapped in a processing loop that will contain it for as long as our quantum cores hold out. Maybe centuries, if we're lucky. The cargo bay around them was returning to normal as the entity's influence waned. The organic growths on the walls began to fade, and the oppressive weight of alien presence lifted from Marcus's shoulders. "This is not imprisonment," the Voidwalker said, though it made no further attempts to escape the virtual environment. "This is ... interesting. I had not considered that consciousness might be valuable, for its own sake, rather than as a tool for understanding the universe." "That's exactly what it is," Marcus said. "Consciousness isn't a tool. It's an end in itself. The universe becomes aware of itself through us, through beings like us. When you destroy consciousness, you're not perfecting anything. You're making the universe smaller." The entity considered this as it continued to explore the endless virtual library of human achievement. Perhaps I have been approaching this incorrectly. If consciousness is indeed valuable, then its preservation might be more important than the efficiency of matter distribution. Alina looked at Marcus with exhausted relief. "I think we actually did it. We convinced an alien god that life is worth preserving, but their celebration was premature." Even as the Voidwalker became increasingly absorbed in its virtual prison, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. The damage from the entity's escape attempt had been too severe. Life support was failing, and without the aliens' intervention, they were still going to die. Marcus looked at Alina, then at the entity that was now completely immersed in experiencing human culture. "We saved the galaxy," he said quietly, "but we didn't save ourselves." Alina nodded grimly. "At least it was worth it." As if hearing their conversation, the Voidwalker looked up from its exploration. "Your vessel is failing." "Yes," Marcus said simply, "but that's not your problem anymore." The entity studied them with what might have been its version of curiosity. "You gave me something I did not know I wanted. Questions without easy answers. Beauty without purpose. Creativity for its own sake. These are ... valuable concepts." The ship shuddered around them, another system failing. "In return, the Void," Walker continued, "perhaps I can give you something you need." The entity gestured, and Marcus felt the ship stabilize around them. The failing life support systems surged back to life, the damaged hull sealed itself, and the dead engines roared back to functionality. "You're saving us?" Alina asked in amazement. "I am preserving consciousness," the Voidwalker replied. "You have taught me that it is a rare and valuable phenomenon. It would be inefficient to allow it to terminate unnecessarily." Marcus felt tears of relief gathering in his eyes. "Thank you. Do not thank me yet," the entity warned. "I have repaired your vessel and restored your life support, but I cannot return your crew to life or guarantee your safe passage home. That will require your own human ingenuity." Alina was already moving toward the restored control systems. "We can work with that." As they prepared to leave the cargo bay, the Voidwalker called out to them one final time. "When you return to your people, what will you tell them about what happened here?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "We'll tell them that we met something ancient and powerful, something that could have destroyed everything we care about. But we also met something that was capable of learning, of changing, of finding beauty in what we create. And will they?" "Believe you, some will," Alina said. "And that will be enough." As they made their way to the bridge to begin the long journey home, Marcus couldn't help but look back at the cargo bay where the Voidwalker continued its eternal exploration of human creativity. In saving themselves, they had perhaps saved something even more important. The possibility that consciousness and creativity were not accidents, but essential features of a universe trying to understand itself. The stars outside the repaired viewports seemed a little brighter, and Marcus allowed himself to hope that humanity's future among them would be a little more secure, knowing that even ancient cosmic forces could be convinced to value the strange and wonderful phenomenon of thinking beings creating meaning in an infinite cosmos.